Hello everyone, this is your girl Ada. We're going to be talking about the American Song Contest today. This is the video that I promised where I'm going to be talking about the idea for the contest itself, what I think about it, what it needs for Eurovision, so let's get right into it. The American Song Contest is the first extracontinental spin-off of the Eurovision Song Contest. The first attempts at bringing it to the US soil actually started as early as 2006 when Ben Silverman was pitching it to NBC as competition to Fox's American Idol. So eventually, this year, finally, NBC developed the show, the American version of the show, which I was reacting to in these videos here, and which will conclude this Monday with the grand final. Now in this video, I would like to explore questions such as, what does this expansion mean for the Eurovision brand? Do we even need this expansion? How does the American Song Contest differ from its original? And also whether there's any chances of it taking root in the landscape of American TV entertainment. Which brings me to the first question. Why even expand in the first place? Of course, the first person to envision Amerivision is, as I mentioned, Ben Silverman. But the guys who actually did pull it off were Christer Björkman and Anders Lenhoff, two Swedish producers who have worked on several Eurovision Song Contests and also Melodifestivalen, which, for those who don't know, is the Swedish Song Contest, which is also the national selection for Eurovision. Actually, Ben Silverman also got involved because he was like, nah, you can't do this without me. Now, I read an interview with them, and when it comes to their reasoning or their motives, why they decided to do it, why they thought they should bring Eurovision to America, it was basically because we can. So basically the motives seem to be strictly commercial, right? We have a product and we could sell it to more people. It stems from this reflexive idea that obviously growth is good, obviously expansion is good, and this belief that the goal of any enterprise that we create should be to take over more and more markets. But what's in it for the Eurovision Song Contest, though? Obviously there will be some money coming EBU's way, European Broadcasting Union, because of licensing. Now, it's a good question, how will that money be spent? If it goes to making Eurovision even greater and grander, then I'd be okay with that. Also, another line of reasoning, I guess, was that, well, if we make this American version, then maybe that will get American audiences more interested in watching the original show as well. Which brings me to the second question. Why America? Eurovision fans obviously know that there were serious attempts to create Eurovision Asia, which were directed by the national Australian broadcaster. Honestly, that idea sounded a lot more exciting to me, personally. I was imagining K-pop bands and Indian Bollywood singers battling it out on the stage. But as we know, none of this came to fruition. And honestly, it's not that hard to see why. The logistics of it were just too hard, I think. Number one, Eurovision requires voting, which means everyone has to be watching at the same time. And that's tough because Asia is freaking huge, right? You could maybe announce the results the next day, but that kind of kills the suspense, right? You don't have that issue with the World Cup or the Olympics because everything is decided right there on the pitch or on the track or swimming pool or mat or court. Well, you get the idea, right? Independent of whether anyone is actually watching or not. You don't have any of those challenges in America, right? They're free time zones, yes, but that's still manageable. Everything is organized by a single broadcaster, which makes things a lot easier, although it raises other concerns, but more on that later. Now, the other thing is, and this brings me back to Björkman and Lenhoff, I think that there were good reasons to think that this is going to work, right? That's just anecdotal evidence, but if you just put on any Americans React to Eurovision video on YouTube, you will see that at the end, practically everybody says oh, yeah, I would love to see this show in America with states competing with original songs. That would be cool. That's just my cat. Nyonya. Now, Anders Lenhoff said, when he was explaining why he thought the American Song Contest was a commercially viable project, said this, it sounds like a brilliant idea with states competing instead of countries. Americans love music. Americans love competition. Americans love where they come from. They have an awesome amount of pride for their home state, for their hometown, and being just an eager observer of an enthusiast of the American culture, I would say that I agree. Another thing that seems interesting to me is why bring this distinctly European cultural phenomenon to America, right? From our European perspective, why would we do that? Björkman and Lenhoff themselves are Europeans, right? So why would they feel the need to share this part of our culture with Americans, right? Other than the obvious monetary interest, what's the point? So, I always thought of America and Europe, they look as if there are like two people talking on the phone, describing images to one another, and each one was trying to recreate the image that the other one was describing. So everything is kind of the same, but also totally different. And then on top of that, of course, America was built by people from Europe, right? And this was this utopian project, like it's gonna be Europe 2.0. It's gonna be still Europe, but better, without the flaws of the original, right? But of course, when we bring children into this world, for example, right, and we imagine that they're going to be like the perfected version of ourselves, like it never works out that way, because it turns out that they have a mind of their own and they turn into something that we didn't expect. So yeah, anyway, so I think that that's kind of the relationship that we have, right? Because America is this sort of child or homunculus or, younger sibling. There is this mutual curiosity and this urge to like keep comparing ourselves to the other, keep measuring ourselves against the other. America has been pretty successful at exporting its culture to Europe. Now, vice versa, not as much, right? Especially if we talk about the continental Europe only. So I guess this was sort of a way of saying like, hey, mamy coś takiego. And if Americans actually embrace Eurovision, right, that would be like a win for us, right? Like we created this cool thing that is so cool that even the cool kids on the block, i.e. Americans, want in on it. That brings me to my next question. Does America need Eurovision though? So many scholars who study Eurovision have concluded that it's predominantly a vehicle for building a pan-European identity and unity. I can list you some articles here if you want to check that out. And I think that that's accurate. The thing is, America has got a multitude of events, cultural phenomena, shows that do just that. I mean, especially sports, but there's other things, like there's the Academy Awards, elections. Obviously, everybody is watching the same TV shows, So, is there a need for yet another thing designed to connect people across America? On the other hand, the American society is the most polarized that it's been ever since the civil rights movement, or maybe ever since the Civil War even. So maybe this is the perfect moment, actually, to introduce a show that will unite people across America who still inexplicably watch television. Now, the other thing is, maybe I underestimate the appetite for these kind of patriotic nation-building events. Americans seem to put way more energy into nation building. I mean, not just the fact that all the states have these cute nicknames, right? I mean, that's significant to me, right? And of course, you see the American flags everywhere, which, I will tell you, to me as a European, that's super weird. Like, why do you feel like you need to keep reminding people what country they're in? Like, America is huge, okay? You can drive for miles, thousands of miles, and you're still in America. You don't have to stick those things everywhere. But that's the thing. Maybe you do have to kind of force it, kind of manufacture it, because American identity doesn't just create and perpetuate itself organically. Not to say that European national identities are somehow more natural or more organic and less, manufactured. It's not like they're like just, picked from the organic tree of national identities, obviously. But because they are rooted in ethnicity and language, it makes it a little bit easier. So, maybe there's not an oversaturation with these kind of vehicles for championing Americanness, right? Maybe they need as many as they can get, and another one will be enthusiastically embraced. I don't know. Which brings me to the issue of diversity. What does diversity mean in the context of the Eurovision Song Contest and the American Song Contest? America and Europe are both very diverse places, albeit in slightly different ways. Obviously, America is made up of people from innumerable places around the world, different races, different ethnicities, different religions, different cultures, right? Of course, Western Europe, due to immigration and because of its colonial history, also has very multicultural societies, but that's definitely not true for Central and Eastern Europe. You could say that the multicultural society of America is like a masala dish or an eintopf, if you will, a good old melting pot, right? Well, all the cultures kind of mix together and create a new dish with all of those notes, different flavors of different cultures. And I think that that's what you could hear in American music, right? Like that you hear these influences from different cultures which create this new, distinctly American sound. European diversity is a little bit different, is more like a meze or tapas or a smorgasbord of flavors, right? You can try a little bit of everything and everything has its own distinct flavor. Separate but equal, to use a terrible turn of phrase. Now, which of those produces a more entertaining show? So this year, we've had some nice additions to the American Song Contest. There was a song which was in Spanish. We had some songs that also were partially in that language. We had a half Korean Alexa performing a K-pop song. But you know, how representative was that song of the state of Oklahoma, right? And the other thing is that apart from those additions, basically pop and country reigned supreme. And I gotta say, it was a little bit boring. I think that in Eurovision this year, we have much more variety in terms of genres, styles, languages, obviously. The American Song Contest was unfortunately a bit boring for me to watch. So the issue of diversity brings me to another question. How does the contest function with a single broadcaster behind it? In Eurovision, each artist doesn't really represent their country. Actually, who they represent is the country's public broadcaster. It's the broadcaster which selects the entry, right? Either through a national selection where the audiences get to vote for their favorite, or through internal selection. But either way, it is still that the song is chosen by some kind of group that is more or less representative of the country's population. And they try to select the song which, according to them, would best represent the country at large. So because of it, I think that there is a considerable amount of grassroots support for the country's participant. Now, in the American Song Contest, it was NBC that selected all of the songs. And not only that, but also what they did was that they surveyed all of the contestants and asked them which states or territories they have a personal connection to. And then later NBC was the one who assigned them to the states, given states or territories. So because of that, you could argue that the American Song Contest is a little bit more possibly rigged because, NBC was not really concerned, I think, about making this show as fair as possible, but rather to, produce the most entertaining show possible. Maybe Oregon could have been represented by a ballad with a broader mainstream appeal, right? But NBC needed some funny entry to balance out the serious performances. So $1 Million Movies it was, which, by the way, I think was an amazing song and honestly should have advanced at least to the semifinals. So that's a shame. NBC also has control over the staging of all of the songs, right? Which is, again, different from Eurovision, where it's the national delegations that prepare the performances on the stage. Now, the other question that this raises is that, yes, there's a single broadcaster behind it, but also it's not a public broadcaster. So in America, I believe there's only one public broadcaster, NPR, and that's it. All the TV stations are private and operate for profit, which, again, has far-reaching ramifications for the show. Obviously, people responsible for the Eurovision Song Contest are still trying to make the show that is as appealing to the viewers as possible, but they don't really have to worry about money from advertisers, so ratings are less of a concern to them. There are no commercial breaks during the Eurovision Song Contest. There is a bit of corporate sponsorship, which has become a bit more noticeable in the recent years. Obviously, everyone watching the Eurovision videos on YouTube constantly sees the logo of the Israeli cosmetics brand Moroccan Oil. Yes, Moroccan Oil is an Israeli brand, which is a little bit of a slap in the face if you ask me. But generally, as far as I know, the main source of financing for the Eurovision Song Contest is the contributions from the participating broadcasters. Therefore, the goal is not really to sell as many ads as possible, but to keep the participating broadcasters relatively happy. Now, ratings are obviously a part of that. Some public broadcasters actually do run ads. I don't think anyone actually runs ads during the show, but they usually run them before and after. And on top of that, of course, they make money off of the voting, right? Because that's done for premium calls. So it's good when a lot of people watch the show. But another way of keeping the broadcasters happy is ensuring a fair competition. Now, NBC doesn't necessarily need to do that. NBC is only worried about making money off of it. Therefore, lots of annoying commercial breaks. And of course, there might be this incentive to sacrifice fairness in favor of, creating a more entertaining show. Now, do I think that the American Song Contest was terribly unfair? I don't know. I don't think so. It didn't seem like that to me, but I'm mostly throwing it out there as a potential risk. So this brings me to the most fundamental question: will it be successful? And what does that success mean for Eurovision? So speaking of ratings, we already know that the ratings for the American Song Contest are somewhat disappointing, with the rival show American Idol doing about 5 times better in terms of viewership. So why is that? Well, I think that it's partially because the American audiences are seeing this format for the first time, and they're just not used to it. When you look at shows like Idol or The Voice, it's about the individual performer, about their individual journey, overcoming adversities, whatnot. There's much more of a personal connection with the participants. Now, Eurovision is not about that at all. Eurovision is all about representing your country on an international stage. It's an opportunity for the nation to show itself in a certain light, for instance, as traditional or modern, conservative, progressive, diverse, homogenous, proud, humble, dignified, with a sense of humor. Also, it's a song competition and not a singing competition, which is an important distinction. The song could easily be performed by anyone, right? We didn't really have cases of artists being replaced in recent years, but in the past, that absolutely happened because it's the song representing the country, not the artist. So, for example, in 1968, the Spanish national broadcaster decided that it was going to be the female singer Maciel, representing the country of the song La La La, and not the original artist Joan Manuel Serrat, because he was insisting on singing in Catalan. In 1971, for example, the Belgian duo Nicole and Hugo couldn't travel to Dublin for the contest because Nicole had fallen ill. And instead of them, their song was performed by another two Belgian artists, Jacques Ramond and Lily Castel. So, like I said, it's the song, not the artist, which might not be super compelling for a TV show, especially a long-running TV show. People might be a bit confused that the artists keep performing the same song over and over again. Also, there isn't that kind of anticipation about what song are they gonna sing next, When it comes to Eurovision, you gotta remember, we have only 3 shows, and they happen over the span of 1 week, right? And a lot of the viewers just skip the semifinals altogether, which take place on weekdays, and then they only watch the grand final on Saturday. So there's no time for people to get bored with it. Maybe this is a question of just slowly building that fan base. Eurovision has been around for 66 years. Everyone knows about it in Europe. The American Song Contest simply does not have that sort of legacy to fall back on. Will it have the same kind of resilience as Eurovision, though? Will it stick around for 66 years? I doubt it. And the reason is because there's only a single broadcaster involved, and I'm pretty sure NBC is gonna drop it as soon as the ratings fall below what they deem acceptable. Eurovision, on the other hand, is broadcasted by 40 TV stations across Europe. If one of them drops out, which happens all the time, by the way, for different reasons, it doesn't threaten the contest overall. But we also need to ask ourselves, what would the potential success of the American Song Contest mean for Eurovision? Would it generate more interest in the contest, or is it going to take away from Eurovision? Again, that's an open question. I tend to be more optimistic on this, but of course there is a slight chance, right, that the world falls in love with the American Song Contest, licenses it left and right, it becomes the second Oscars or something, and, people will even forget that it originated as a European format. Now, that's not very likely, but there is a slight chance, and nothing hurts more than being beaten at your own game. I mean, the best example of this is World Series in baseball. Obviously, I don't mean Major League World Series because it's not a World Series if it's two countries competing. I'm talking about the real World Series, so Little League Baseball World Series. Now, Little League Baseball expanded internationally in 1958. There were some foreign teams competing before that, but they were more like an exception rather than a rule. Throughout the history of the competition, US-based teams have won the plurality of titles. Notice I'm using the word plurality and not majority. In the early 70s, however, Taiwan absolutely dominated the competition, scoring 4 consecutive wins between 1971 and 1974. Baseball is literally called the American pastime, I mean, that had got to hurt. Which is why, as a result, in 1975, foreign teams were banned from competition. Now, decision was quickly reversed the next year, but I understand the sentiment there, right? I mean, do I actually want the American Song Contest to be successful? Oh, hell no. Chcę, żeby się wypierdolili i sobie ten głupi ryj rozwalili. Okay, but what if it fails completely? What if NBC falls flat on its face, next year no one wants to watch it, and it's a spectacular fiasco? It would be a bit of a bummer, obviously, but I don't think it would hurt Eurovision in itself. It would definitely put a serious question mark on trying to expand the franchise outside of the continent. I don't think it would damage the reputation of the contest in Europe. And then there's nothing bad about Eurovision remaining a distinctly local phenomenon. I don't think it would change anything for Eurovision fans, really. It would just curb the enthusiasm of some ambitious Eurovision producers. I do root for the American Song Contest to be moderately successful, though. Just because I would actually love to see other spin-offs be developed, just not in North America. Obviously, I already discussed issues with Eurovision Asia, but I do think that the contest has chances of working in Africa. Now, number one, this is finally a continent that could have a proper Eurovision-inspired name, because Afrovision totally works as a word, unlike Amerivision or Asiavision. Number two, Africa is longer than it is wide, so you could potentially get everyone to watch the show at the same time. Number three, it would be just really fascinating because, us Westerners don't really know much about Africa, unfortunately. So it would be great for us to have this opportunity to learn more about it and to discover new styles of music, new languages, etc. But instead, we're going to get the Canadian Song Contest, as if anyone was asking for that. I mean, maybe the Canadians were asking for that, I don't know. Okay, so those are my thoughts on the American Song Contest. Now tell me what you think. Do you think there will be more cycles of the American Song Contest? Do you think there will be more global spin-offs of Eurovision? Which region in the world would you most like to get its own song contest? What do you think about the differences between the Eurovision Song Contest and the American Song Contest? Let me know in the comments. As usual, if you liked this video, please maybe consider hitting the like button. And if you want some more of my content, why don't you go and subscribe and click the bell so you get notified about any new uploads to my channel. Thank you very much for joining me today, and bye!